Poštovani gledalci, tema COVID-19, odnosno njegovog porijekla, je izuzetno važna i prevažna. Ono o čemu se posljednjih dana govori jeste da bi Svjetska zdravstvena organizacija u narednim danima trebala izdati izvještaj o porijeklu ovog virusa u Wuhanu. Međutim, postoji grupacija naučnika u svijetu koji kažu kako nam treba nova istraga, novi izvještaj, novi podaci i potpuno novi pristup cijelom ovom slučaju. Upravo o tome razgovaramo sa višom istražiteljicom sa King's College u Londonu, profesoricom Filippom Lentzos. Professor Lentzos, welcome to program N1.
Thank you. It's good of you to have me.
I said in my opening that you and your colleagues, about the dozens of them, are asking the World Health Organization for the new investigation on the origins of COVID-19 and on a Wuhan investigation. We know that the WHO is preparing its initial report from Wuhan mission. They said that that was not a WHO mission, but that was independent mission just organized by WHO. But what is your key request and why are you going against this report with all your colleagues, including one of them who's advisor to the WHO, Jamie Metzel?
That's right. So we are calling for a full and independent investigation of the origins of the pandemic. And our point is that what we've got so far from the joint WHO-China mission is that it was not an investigation, it was a study tour. So they didn't have the mandate, the independence, or the access in China to carry out a full and unrestricted investigation.
Now, when you saw what they have said once they came back, now we are seeing more and more elements missing from this. Professor Peter Daszak has said that they didn't have access to data from the missing database in Wuhan. There is also 4 hypotheses, and one is very interesting. That's the lab origin hypothesis. And in one of your articles, you said that the one side says, oh, that one is discarded. And the WHO on the other side, same side, says, oh, nothing is discarded. What is about that hypothesis about lab origin?
Well, there seems to be some conflicting information coming from the joint team and the WHO itself. On the one hand, as you say, some say the lab leak theory is not likely and will be discarded and not investigated further. We've also heard from WHO headquarters that, yes, the lab leak should be investigated. My own view and the view of my colleagues in the open letter is certainly that both theories must remain on the table as possibilities, and both theories must be properly investigated. What we saw in the study tour was that there was not enough access provided to the team in terms of the lab database, for instance, but also other lab records, hospital records. They did not take their own samples. They did not choose who they spoke to. And so there was really a lack of access to get to the sort of information you would need for a credible investigation.
But to get that credible investigation, would we need a bigger team, much more equipped team, and with mandate from whom?
Yes, I think that's right. We do need a much bigger team that encompasses more kinds of skill sets and expertise. So, for instance, the team that went to Wuhan, the joint China WHO team, had particular skills in epidemiology and genetics, all wonderful skills if you're going to look at the natural spillover theory. But if you're going to investigate the lab leak theory, you also need additional skill sets within the group. So you'd need things like expertise in biosafety, expertise in biosecurity, people who have past experience of carrying out these kinds of experience in highly political and difficult circumstances. So you need hard-headed investigators, you need translators, an understanding of the Chinese culture or the local culture where you are investigating. people with forensic experience. So absolutely, you need a wider skill set, and you also need a different mandate. Whether that mandate should come from the WHO or whether it should come from the UN General Assembly is still open to question.
Now, one of the questions which is popping up is we still have that confusion about those wet markets in Wuhan and the theory about lab, because we know that the majority of the scientists in the world were keen to go towards the wet markets theory. But we know that the former US administration by the President Trump was going with that lab theory. How much damage this can do to the investigation, but also to understanding of the origins of the virus?
Well, certainly the market is an important location to look at and to investigate. It seems to have been a super spreader location, so it's important. But there were earlier cases not connected with the market. So that suggests that the market wasn't the original place where the virus spread from. So it's important to look at it, but it's also important to look at other sites. I think the Trump administration pushing the lab leak theory has, to some extent, made it more complicated to look into the lab leak theory. It's also linked the lab leak theory with a lot of conspiracy theories, which are false and not true, unhelpful to the debate. So we're not saying that this has been a genetically modified virus, that it's been deliberately created in the lab. We're not saying it's a biological weapon. We're saying this leak could have happened in the course of regular research on, coronaviruses.
But Professor, should we then do, if it's confirmed what you're saying, that the wet market was not the origin and that we had a spread before, should we then have a broader investigation or different broader investigations, for example, to go towards Italy, towards New York, to see how they got the virus, because they were first under attack after Wuhan and after China?
That's certainly what China wants us to do. All of China's narrative is that the frozen food hypothesis, what some are terming the popsicle theory, is what's most likely. I disagree. A lot of us disagree. It's important to study the market, what happened at the market, but it's very clear that there were infections before in China. So that doesn't necessarily say that you need to go abroad to study what happened abroad. It means we need access. Investigators need to be given access to hospital records, to infections that were recorded before the market, that were unrelated to the market. And that's the sort of information that China has not been forthcoming with to the study team that went there a few weeks ago.
Now, one of the things is that the scientists for years and years in the past were saying that we should expect the pandemic like this to happen. And we saw some close viruses to this one in the past, but not in this spreading amount. But have we learned from the past how to deal with those things and investigation, to use those lessons now at this point, or this is completely something new where we need to develop a new set of tools to deal with this particular virus and pandemic?
Well, I think in the past, what we've had are specifically related to coronaviruses. We've had both SARS and we've had MERS. And I think there has been a lot learned from those experiences, as we saw in the response by a number of countries in Southeast Asia. They were much better prepared for this kind of epidemic, as it was at that stage before it became a bigger pandemic than Western countries. So yes, I do think we've learned things, but I do think also this instance is different in many aspects. And certainly when it comes to the investigation of the origins, we do need to apply new tools.
I know that you worked on disinformations, and we have them quite a bit related to this pandemic and the virus and everything. And you mentioned the conspiracy theories regarding President Trump. How much damaging those misinformations and everything were in our response to the pandemic, and how much danger they present if something like this happens in the future with our interconnected societies now, especially via social media and internet and availability of information and disinformation?
Yes, I think this has real consequences. I mean, the disinformation, misinformation has all been coming from a number of different sources around the world. And it's very unhelpful, and it can have serious consequences. So it means that people don't know where the authoritative and truthful sources of information are. You start listening to the sorts of information that is actually can be harmful to you, which means you might not go to your doctor, you might not take the right course of action. We're seeing vaccination facilities being attacked. We're seeing anti-immigrant sentiments, for instance, increasing. All of these things have real impacts on people's health. And so I think from that perspective, it's very important to try to counter some of the conspiracy theories, the misinformation and the disinformation that's coming out, and especially in times of a pandemic.
But what to do, Professor, when you have a person who sits in the White House and it's a president of the United States and comes out at the press conference and said that we should think about injecting disinfectants and similar products to deal with COVID-19, or when we have Mr. Trump and Mr. Bolsonaro and other leaders promoting medicines such like hydroxychloroquine, which was later proven that doesn't have any effects on COVID-19. But some people went and used them because those proven, under quotes, sources of information gave them those informations.
Yes, I think what we have to do is to make people aware that there is a problem with misinformation and disinformation. The WHO itself has labeled it the infodemic as a sort of coming alongside the pandemic itself. There's so much, an overabundance of information. And in order to deal with this, we need to make people aware that this is a problem. We need to equip people with the tools so that they can be critical of the information that they receive, and guide people to authoritative sources of information. So national institutes of health, the World Health Organization are good sources of information when it comes to treatments and responses to health issues.
Now, the element of science here, which is very important, is vaccines. And some are saying that the speed with which we developed these vaccines is worrying for them. But that also shows that we are still not confident when it comes to the science. We don't believe to the science enough in some areas of our societies, and some are saying, they're going to put the microchips or stuff like that in the vaccines, or this is just a botched process which didn't took enough time, so I don't want to take this vaccine. How we can ensure people that really those vaccines are coming from the right science?
Well, you have to make sure, you have to make sure that the vaccines have gone through the proper clinical testing and are generally approved vaccines. And I think, I for sure will be getting vaccinated when I have the opportunity to do so. And I would recommend anyone to get vaccinated, because certainly the vaccination is better than the disease.
What is your view on our security in the future, especially biosecurity, and in line with that, with the cybersecurity, because we're speaking about those things almost in a one line. Should we be worried in the future about those things and endangerment which we could get from them in the future as the tools and weapons of fighting or political influencing, or even trying to overtake the superpower status in the world?
Certainly issues around cyber attacks, infiltration of databases, hacking, all of these issues are big challenges for all of our societies today, and something that does require more of a considered and strategic response. So yes, it is something we need to worry about, but it's also something we can do something about. So there are efforts to try to counter some of this.
And one of my last questions will be this. How is the science changed over this last year? Because all of us, we are working from home, you're researching from home, you're lecturing your students from home, you're cooperating with your colleagues from home. What we can learn from this, and are we changing our ways of communication and collaboration with this new online normality?
Yes, I mean, the last year has certainly been a challenge for many of us. In my own context, reaching students, now teaching to a virtual classroom where some students have to get up in the middle of the night to attend lectures is very challenging for all of us. And it's certainly been challenging, I think, also for the scientific enterprise, for scientists who are unable to get access to their labs, and so on. So yes, it's been a challenge. I think many have stepped up and adjusted and have tried to make the best out of it. I think the idea of going back to the old ways is, maybe almost nostalgic. I think there will be a new normal. I think probably many people will work more from home than they did before, including also experts and scientists. But I think you should also note that there are some good stories coming out of this too. It is incredible that within less than a year, there have been so many vaccines produced as a result of some very, good science going in. So there's good and bad as with so many things in this pandemic.
And for the last, what we should do, especially from a science point, when it comes to the mental health, should we develop new tools and new guidance to help not only people who are working from home, but also the scientists and journalists and children who are going in online school, and your students who are studying online, and with these lockdowns which are taking months and months away from our lives?
Yes, I think mental health is an issue that is increasingly becoming a challenge. Again, we are seeing more initiatives, more focus on this, and that is good, but there's a long way to go still. And I suspect this will remain a challenge for many years to come.
Professor, thank you so very much for this interview.
It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Poštovani gledalci, govorili smo o temi COVID-19, njegovog porijekla i onoga što se dešava u vezi sa istragom koja je vođena u Wuhanu, ali isto tako sa posljedicama pandemije sa kojima se nosimo već duže vrijeme. Ostanite i dalje uz program N1.